Dennis, it's a great privilege to speak to you. You saw that our main story today was focused on the escalating threat of nuclear conflict. I wonder, knowing what you do from about how Congress operates internally, about what contingency there is for nuclear war, how a lay person like myself could predict that escalating tension with Russia would lead to a standoff of this nature, and why we're being presented with this spectacle by an administration that seems to be framing itself in preparation for the November elections as a safe pair of hands.
Yeah, I mean, we can't look at nationhood as where it is right now, which is a precondition for war in a run-up to an election. America has to take a different direction here. We have to realize that Russia is responding to a long series of events, beginning with NATO's encirclement program, the 2014 overthrow of the Ukrainian government, the missiles that are now being sent, the drones that are being sent towards Russia, the $61 billion that was just appropriated by Congress, most of which is going to the military in the U.S. to create arms to have war with Russia. So look, this dialectic of conflict we're in, nuclear war isn't anything to mess with, obviously, but the fact that it's now in the discussion, whether it's from a TV person in Russia or not, has to wake people up that we're screwing around with World War III, and that we need to start pulling back and talking with each other instead of a war of words, which it could escalate into nuclear exchange.
How is it that the Biden administration are able to frame themselves as, and indeed not only the Biden administration, I actually would like to fold into this, if I may, Dennis, the media establishment? Say, for example, if you take MSNBC anchors or, Jen Psaki, when they speak about the current DOC in the Democratic Party, in contrast to the Republican Party and under the auspices of a figure like Trump, what we're being invited to accept is that it's the grown-ups versus petulant, psychopathic, demagogic, 20th century style tyrants. But I'm beginning to think that if you were neutral, it would be safer to vote for Donald Trump than to vote for Joe Biden. That administration is hell-bent on war. That if you're looking for a safe pair of hands, the often declared small hands of Trump would be safer than the mad, arthritic, potentially red button intent finger of Joe Biden. Do you think that's a reasonable argument, that they're not rational, they're not the grown-ups, they're kind of vampiric psychopaths?
Well, there's a couple different elements here based on what you just said. First of all, the media is typically a spear carrier for the government. It's only seldom that the media has taken on the government as it did during the Pentagon Papers era. What we have is a repetition of government propaganda that goes on. Now, with respect to the candidates that are in this race, I'm not taking the side of either candidate or any of the candidates. What I am saying is that we need to take a different approach as a nation. America needs to be a nation among nations, not a nation above nations. This idea that somehow the rest of the world died and left us in charge has to go out with the dodo bird, because we as a nation cannot afford this arms buildup. 56% of our discretionary spending went for the military, and it's more than $1 trillion, and add in the intelligence, so-called intelligence spending. I think that America right now has to pull back, change its direction. Otherwise, we're headed towards a much wider war, no matter who the president is. Remember, Trump was clueless about the deep state, and they were attacking him from every direction. And I don't know if, and him being in the dock right now, I guess, is an extension of that. But we just have to keep in mind that we're dealing not with individuals and their personalities. We're dealing with a whole extension and archipelago of government that is global.
Yes, that really does seem apparent. Are we naive to think that any occupant of a entrenchant set of systems could deliver meaningful change while operating within a paradigm that seems to be restrictive by its nature and designed to prevent the kind of changes that are necessary? A simple example would be this. If there were a referendum on the $95 billion aid package that's just been granted to the collective interests of Ukraine, Israel, and some imagined and projected threat against China regarding Taiwan, if there was a referendum on that, I don't imagine that $95 billion bill would be passed with the effortlessness through which it was,
Right.
its lubricated pathway through both the Senate and Congress. So what we have there is a disjunct between the establishment and the people that it governs that's it sort of is distinct and maybe irreconcilable. So why are we not discussing the possibility of referenda, decentralisation, the ability for ordinary people to... The arguments that are made, Dennis, around handguns by people that are anti-gun, they say when the Bill of Rights and the right to bear arms was passed, you didn't have semi-automatics, you had muskets. Well, at the same time that the Constitution was designed, it wasn't possible for everybody to have immediate democracy and immediate referenda and representation through fully immersive technology. So why are we pretending we need this sort of rather croaking, corruptible and deeply corrupted model of democracy or representative republicanism, or whatever people want to call it? Why are we pretending that there isn't a better way?
Well, first of all, you're right. If Russell, if the American people had a direct vote on whether to spend $95 billion more for wars against other countries at a time when real wages are going down and rents are going up, the cost of housing is going up, cost of childcare, food, every essential of life is going up. Inflation is taking a big chunk out of people's expendable budget. When you look at that, people, of course, they wouldn't vote for a war. But what happens? The Congress is captive. And the Congress is supposed to vote the will of the people. That's what the whole idea of government of the people, but it doesn't happen that way. It's not working that way. And so that's why today people have to pay attention to what's happening in the congressional races, because if a member of Congress is voting against your interest and people have an obligation to start checking how their member's voting, then you're the one, the referendum then becomes in November, so you vote to replace that individual. So, this whole idea about a democracy or republic, whatever anyone wants to call it, is a government of the people, but it's not happening right now. It's a government of special interests. It's a government of the military-industrial complex, which really doesn't care if there's a war or not, as long as they keep on making it. But you can make more, as they're doing in Ukraine and in the Middle East, if you can keep the tensions going, and you can create this dialectic of conflict. So I'm running as an independent because I know that this dichotomous thinking, which characterizes U.S. policy, has to be broken, that there has to be a way to say, look, there's another way of looking at the world. And of course, the dichotomy doesn't even exist anymore in a sense because you have a unipolar government pretending that America is at the apex of a unipolar world.
Yes, and it does seem that that is the determining factor in many of the conflicts we're describing. And of course, you are running as an independent candidate for Ohio's 7th congressional district, and you've just mentioned the significance of that position. Realistically, though, when it comes to a bill like that has just been passed, although there are notable exceptions that have spoken out against it, and I think 21 people in Congress voted against that bill, they were all Republicans, and in the Senate, Massey and of course Rand Paul spoke out against the bill, as well as the the 702 surveillance bill. I just wonder, Dennis, when it comes to something as complex as the arming of nations that are involved in conflicts that a significant number of people don't agree with, how you are able to represent those interests and rather than just rhetorically airing them, actually ensure that those interests are served, which is, of course, the dynamic that we're that we believe is in place, or at least that's explicitly what's supposed to be happening. No one believes that's what's happening.
Well, the mythic dimensions of government of the people is that people have a say in what's going on. But keep this in mind, since 9/11, America has spent about, we've increased the deficit to 34 trillion. 8 trillion of that is due specifically to the wars since 9/11. Now that equals about $97,000 per family of four in America. Would people willingly give that up? No. But our basic way of life has been undermined since then by the government's decisions to continue war. We went in war against Iraq that was based on lies. I led the effort against that war. We waged war against Libya. Should have never done that. It was a total disaster. We're spending money for war, and that leads to a destructive undermining of our quality of life here in this country. This whole idea about guns and butter at the same time, don't kid yourself. I mean, more and more of our budget is going towards war. And, this, you can go back to Sparta or Athens. We are militarizing our society, militarizing our thought, militarizing our consciousness to the point of where everywhere we go, we bring a hammer and everything we look at is a nail.
When the Iraq War was being augmented, designed under the auspices of a lie, it was the hawkish Republicans that coalesced and drove us towards war and towards more surveillance and towards more censorship. And yet now the party of war is the Democratic Party. What changed, Dennis?
Yeah, I think what happens is this. The congressional party when the Democrats were in charge in the White House, the Democrats generally will be following the executive. The congressional Democrats will follow the executive. Same things happen when the Republicans are in charge. You have a Democratic president, the Republicans will resist. A Democratic president, the Democrats will go along. During 9/11, you had a Republican president, you had Democrats in Congress who went after that president. But my view, Russell, to get right into the nitty-gritty of that, a war which cost America anywhere between $3 and $5 trillion, depending on who you talk to, 1 million Iraqi lives, 5,000 American men and women who served the country killed, all based on lies. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Al-Qaeda's role in 9/11 did not have anything to do with the anthrax attack, did not have weapons of mass destruction, was not a threat to America, had neither the intention nor capability of attacking America. And so what do? We waged war, we killed all those people, and the people who told us those lies, remember, I held an impeachment legislation towards President Bush and President Cheney for lying to the American people, but the people who lied, no consequences. The people who are lying to us now take us into wars around the world. No consequences. This is an example of what happens when government is out of the reach of the people, when government is not responsible, when the media simply parrots a government line. This is a dangerous moment in American history, and it really needs to take a different direction. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running as an independent. Imagine this, Russell, 217 Republicans, 217 Democrats, and one independent, me. And I'm ready to take up that challenge because I believe this country not only deserves better, but we need to change the narrative. That right now, the narrative muzzles free speech. It wants to dismantle TikTok, suppress campus protests, do away with Assange and all the whistleblowers, broadcast atrocity propaganda. We need to change the narrative, and that's one of the reasons why I intend to go back to Washington with the support of the people, of course.